Hi, I'm Joel Stickley, and for the last 6 months I've been Lincolnshire's Poet Laureate. This is a very short poem that I wrote right at the beginning of my residency, just to kind of ease into writing about Lincolnshire. It's called By Way of Introduction. Into the valley of the A46, the valley of roadworks and limestone bricks, of airfields and wheat fields and beet fields and grey seals, into the valley of Donna Nook, into the valley of Market Deeping, of Heckington, Quarrington, Donnington, Luddington, Horncastle, Mablethorpe, Winterton, Waddington, Alford and Sleaford and Stamford and Manthorpe and Spalding and Grantham and Epworth and Scunthorpe, into the valley of Skegness, into the valley of mean more but say less, into the valley of poetry, of knowing we have something to say, into the valley then, up and away. For me, this residency has been a chance to explore the county, to go to events, to meet people, to write about stuff, to help other people write about stuff. I've done workshops in schools, I've done poetry readings in village halls, I've been to the county show, I've done poetry readings from an air traffic control tower at RAF Waddington, which was quite exciting. It's been a great excuse just to get out and to see everything that Lincolnshire's got to offer and explore its cultural and creative sides kind of from the ground up. One really interesting project that was part of the Igniting Ambition programme was a thing called Knit Together, which was community and guerrilla knitting. They constructed a whole running track out of wool, for example, but they do this thing called yarn bombing, where they knit things in public places and just leave them there, like a kind of crocheted graffiti. So I wrote this poem for them. It's called Balaclava. Just hours before, on that fateful morning, knitted in code down the length of a sleeve, came a chillingly cryptic yet cosy warning. If you're not keen on knitwear, you might want to leave. It was just the first in a string of surprises, an awakening monster that starts with a twitch. War often begins in the strangest of guises, and this one began with a Kitchener stitch. By lunchtime the streets were beyond recognition, festooned with long trails of tightly knit yarn. Whoever had struck had enough ammunition to knit and embroider and crochet and darn, till everything in the immediate area looked like a Boxing Day walk of shame. For the first time we realised that nothing was scarier than the garish nest that the city became. Lurid pink pullovers covered each house, with neighbours peering through pearls to be nosy. Each parked car had a new cashmere blouse and every telephone box had a cosy. The claims of responsible parties came fast. An underground clandestine grandmother cell, a crochet fanatic with guilt in her past, a shadowy network with jumpers to sell. Conspiracy theories were woven with haste. The news reports talked about threads to be followed. No matter how fishy the story might taste, it was grabbed by the public and rapidly swallowed. But the truth was much simpler, as truths often are. Simpler and stranger and harder to see. When a burned DVD was just thrown from a car, it didn't take long to be played on TV. Surrounded by yarn, in a high-backed chair, sipping a goblet of good vintage Carver, a figure reclined, and they all saw him there, just eyes and a smile and a black balaclava. "You'll have to excuse me," the figure began. "As you see, at the moment I'm a little tied up. It seems that I've got quite the job on my hands." He laughed and then sipped some more wine from his cup. "I hope you enjoy all the changes I've made. You'll have noticed, of course, that I've covered things fully. I've tried to be subtle, but still I'm afraid that I've left your town centre, well, rather woolly. Don't think me a monster," he said through his mask. "My work is creative, I never destroy. It's just that when I put my mind to a task, I simply can't stop, and it brings me such joy." He paused for a second and put down his wine, reaching across for his needles instead. With deliberate care he began a new line. "I have an ambition," he quietly said. "I long for the day when you all knit with me, a day when the clacking of needles will rise to drown out the world and let us just be. We'll re-knit the wool that was over our eyes." In homes through the land, people nodded their heads. As their tellies went blank, they all stumbled outside and began to reach out for the ends of the threads that the knitter had left as a starting-off guide. The clacking of needles soon rose to the sky. As scarves beyond number began to take shape, the yarn seemed to writhe, gather up, multiply, as stitches created a new cityscape. I think with poetry it's very easy to fall back on the same old subjects, and particularly with something like a laureateship, which I suppose is quite an old-fashioned idea. It's quite tempting just to write about the places or the historical events of a certain area. So to be able to write about contemporary things and things that are happening now and things that are unusual has been really refreshing. One of the best things about this residency has been the opportunity to do poetry readings in new and unusual places. One of my favourites has been the Air Traffic Control Tower at RAF Waddington as part of the air show over the summer. This is a poem that I wrote for that occasion. It's called The Invention of Flight. It started small. A fall from a chair when fixing a light, and flight just happened. Mrs. Slatton of Spalding, aged 74, the floor just tumbling up towards her. It affords her a moment to think. She blinks and then she's flying. Without even trying, mankind's oldest obstacle surmounted. She accounted for her success that day with a range of things. She did not sprout unexpected wings or miraculously levitate and whiz around. She just fell, then failed to reach the ground. Before she could adjust to this turn of events, over the fence floated Paul from next door. "Caw," was all he could say. The way he dipped and bobbed as he lobbed himself over the trellis made Mrs. Slatton slightly jealous, so she tried some moves of her own. She had never flown before, so this was trial and error. The hint of terror behind the excitement felt like an indictment of ever having walked on the ground. She tumbled around and giggled like a baby. Maybe this was her reward for years of arthritis. She might as well enjoy it. It didn't take long for the flying to spread. People falling out of bed didn't make it to the floor. Their loved ones saw them float out of windows, still snoring, while postmen, soaring high over barking dogs, let catalogues and junk mail fall like snow. The streets below were deserted. Disconcerted, but giddy with their new skill, people filled the sky with loop-the-loops, whoops of excitement and daredevil swoops. There were near misses, airborne kisses, men flying fast to escape from the misses. All of human life was there. Except now, everything was up in the air. By the afternoon, the surface of the moon couldn't have looked much bleaker than the high street. The feet that would normally have pounded those roads were far from grounded and rising in their droves. Only hours had passed since the invention of flight, but as night came on, almost everyone had gone. Only one hovering figure remained. And as the darkness came, she strained to still see her front door, before rising up to join the ones who had gone before. Mrs. Slatton of Spalding, aged 74. As well as my own work, it's been really exciting to engage with the other projects that are part of Igniting Ambition. And one of those has been the Trivia of Eccentric England, an art project about exploring eccentricity and what it means to be normal. So they commissioned me to write a poem for an event they were doing at the county show called The Normal Parade. Everybody's got debts, but Susanna's in deep. Her negative equity's losing her sleep, and she drives an old Daewoo but dreams of a Jeep. So, at weekends, she takes risks to prove that life's cheap, puts on goggles and lycra, then climbs up and leaps from a high dive to water that's 6 inches deep. The adrenaline rush gives her something to keep when her mortgage repayments are looking too steep. So, she walks in the normal parade. Andy makes notes on the interviewees. Just an endless procession of kids with degrees who go so far to show off their own expertise and the life skills they learned when they lived overseas that they sound like they suffer from brainwash disease. How he longs to get home, give his missus a squeeze, then go down to the garden where nobody sees and relax with a drink and the beard of bees that he wears for the normal parade. Mr. Khan quit his job to become his own boss. But the shop that he opened now runs at a loss, and his dream, like his shop sign, is losing its gloss. So he closes up early and then goes across to the pub near his house where the jukebox plays Bros, and he sneaks to the toilet and then starts to toss off his clothes and get changed, and he knows it's Pop Dross, but he bursts from that toilet and he is Matt Goss as he walks in the normal parade. As Andy, Susanna and Mr. Khan know, life can move along fast when the hours pass slow, until all of a sudden you've nothing to show for those years of work except debts that you owe, be they money or time or ambition, and so it's important to have something hidden below, something small and defiant that makes your heart glow, and this idiosyncrasy helps you to go and walk tall in the normal parade. So, if you write your own episodes of Doctor Who, play Stravinsky and Beethoven on the kazoo, construct life-size giraffes using only bamboo, live for weeks on pot noodles and tiramisu, have a massive collection of foreign shampoo or a box of gum it took years to chew, or a hobby or passion or something you do for the pure joy of knowing it's only for you. Come and walk in the normal parade. For a lot of people from the outside, I think Lincolnshire is Lincoln and then the seaside towns. So for me, it's been exciting to discover all the places in between, and really get a sense of the breadth and variety of Lincolnshire as a county, because it is an amazingly diverse place, and an amazingly big place as well. You don't realise how big Lincolnshire is until you try and drive to every corner of it on single track roads. This is a poem I wrote about a stretch of coastline just north of Mablethorpe, where there's this amazing combination of nature reserve and military testing ground. You go from kind of being careful not to stand on the nests of rare birds to being careful not to stand on unexploded bombs. So I thought that was worth writing about. It's called Theddlethorpe. At Theddlethorpe the sea goes out for miles, and England falls away beneath your feet, while concrete bunkers hidden on the dunes wait silently for rabbits to retreat. Amongst the drift of wood and broken shells, the path along the seaweed tide is lined with white on red official signs that warn that there'll be no reward for things you find. He searches anyway, his school shoes wet, imagination full of guns and gold. He scuffs his feet through suspect spots of sand. Somewhere, back home, his dinner's getting cold. He wants a souvenir of something real. He wants to hold a thing that heroes held, a hand grenade, an unexploded bomb. He wants his heart to swell as theirs have swelled. One scuffing school shoe thunks on something hard. He kneels down and starts to excavate. He feels it, metal buried in the sand. One hand digs deep, then pulls. He feels the weight. It shocks off sand, emerges with a schwop. The cavity refills with rising silt. His breathing quick, he wipes the metal clean. His heart swells now. Excitement, fear, and guilt. He holds it up, the surface oddly slick. It feels so heavy, alien and dead. Then, something from a video game he played. War never changes, whispers in his head. It never does, the lump of metal says. He drops it, stung. It thumps into the sand. A second passes. He is still alive. It stares at him. He wipes dirt from his hand. It speaks again, a hollow metal voice. But you don't know the smell of blood, my lad. Your Xbox zombies never taught you that. That churning in your gut you've never had. He turns and runs. The rabbits scatter out. The puddled sands reflect the afternoon, then rise to fill his footsteps as he goes. The concrete bunkers stare out from the dune. He stumbles on a sunken pile of kelp, turns with his ankle, spins and sprints away. Behind him sits the lump of metal, still. He knows that there'll be no reward today. He feels a burning in his throat and lungs. Imagined Spitfires cover his retreat. At Theddlethorpe the sea goes out for miles, and England falls away beneath his feet. As well as the writing side of the residency, it's been really rewarding to be able to get out into the county and promote poetry for other people and get other people writing. And I've done workshops in schools and with groups of young people, which have been just amazing to see people's reactions to poetry being performed live. Because I think for a lot of people, and older people as well, their only experience of poetry is what they read in school, and poetry in a textbook or in an exam. And in a way that's a real shame, because poetry is something that's alive and that's out loud and that's immediate. So it's been great to give particularly young people and people in school a chance to explore that and to write about things that they're interested in and to perform their work as well, to see poetry as something performed, something out loud, a bit like music or comedy, or one of the art forms that maybe get a bit more press. One of my favourite events that I attended as part of my laureateship was a small festival down in Grimsthorpe. So I decided to write a poem about that uniquely English kind of combination of village fete and festival. This is called It Must Be Fate. In the sculptured grounds of a stately home, there's a man displaying honeycomb that's from a hive he raised himself. He keeps a trophy on his shelf that proves he knows his apiaries. He's here to boast about his bees. And everyone is here because the honey's causing quite a buzz. He's selling job lots to the crowd, who gather round, their laughter loud, their sunburnt faces lifted up to feel the breeze. Their coffee cups are styrofoam with plastic lids, and they've bought ice cream for the kids, and everybody's satisfied, and everything is flushed with pride, and there's a sense that this is us. These classic cars, this vintage bus, these hats for sale, these birds of prey, this Punch and Judy puppet play, and far above, the scudding clouds. and all across the field the crowd just drifts in one good-natured throng. Each parent knows it won't be long before the work week starts again, with stress and mess and chores and rain. But just for now, this is the world. A sunny field with flags unfurled, and wasps in bins, and ice cream cones, and here you cannot feel alone. Within the grounds of this estate, all life is found. It must be fate. It's been a real privilege to work in the post of Lincolnshire Poet Laureate for these 6 months, and obviously in the county that gave the world Alfred Lord Tennyson. Those have been some very big shoes to fill, and Lincolnshire obviously is a wonderfully creative place with a really rich literary culture. I'd like to think that over the course of this tenure we've promoted poetry in the region, and that we've started things that will carry on as well. All the small kind of community poetry meetings, all the festivals and county-wide events that poetry is now a part of, all the people who've come into contact with the work that I've been doing through local radio and local press. So yeah, I'd like to think that in a small way poetry is a bigger part of Lincolnshire life now than it was 6 months ago, and I'd love it if all of those things carried on, and if people kind of saw poetry as part of their lives maybe in a way that they didn't before. And if nothing else, it's proof that you can get work as a poet, which I think is something a lot of people like to hear. So yeah, it's been an absolute privilege, and I look forward to seeing how poetry develops in the county and where it goes next.